Hello, welcome back to B-Roll Redux. How's it going,
Hey,
David?
good morning, Dave. Cowabunga.
Cowabunga. Today we're talking about a really interesting, really unique movie, 1990s live action Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
That's a mouthful, right? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
TMNT. Yeah, that
Right.
doesn't
Yeah.
even
Right. That's
that
how I
doesn't.
Googled it. Right.
All right,
Got
so
quite the franchise too.
man, yeah, I mean it has everything. Well, it was a franchise before, but it really kicked off a lot of movies, a lot of products afterwards.
Right.
This was actually the first time you've ever seen this movie, right?
Well, yeah. First time. First time. I think. Well, I may have to watch another one to see if it was really bad as the first one. But it was a. It took me a while to watch it. An hour and 33 minutes, and I'm probably 2.5 hours. It was stopping and starting and googling. Like, is this really true?
I mean, it was a time, it was a product of its time.
Right.
1990s was 35 years ago,
That's yeah,
and
making me
things
old.
have changed. The way we tell stories have changed. The
Right.
In the 90s and in the late 80s, there was the cheese.
Right.
Everything, was over the top, exaggerated, goofy, look what happened to Batman, 89, it was Tim Burton, 91, Tim Burton again. And then you get to like 92, 93, and you get Jerry Bruckheimer, and look how cheesy the Batman series,
Right. Right. Right.
became, so it was a definitely a product of its time.
Right.
Watching it now for the first time, yeah, mixed reactions, so straight out, what did you feel about the movie?
So it's not actually a bad movie. It's just how it was made, right? 'Cause I'm thinking, I saw the budget was like 13 million. So well, that's a fair chunk of change. But if it was meant to be that way, they did a good job. If they meant to make it like that, they did a good job. I give it two thumbs up on the cheese factor. But I mean, like we talked about, like in pre-production, there was no hero story for the characters, but at the end, it all kind of comes together. The boy's reunited with his dad. It's not Danny anymore. I'm Dan. Those kind, those moments that kind of tie up all the loose ends. Because you don't know where you're going with. I was kind of had trouble keeping track. I knew who the bad guys were, but why are they fighting the bad guys? Where's the red herring? Where's the diamond, but it just what I knew really nothing about going into it, which I wanted to, so I would be surprised, and I was surprised. But it
Yeah,
is a
it
good
just
film,
sits in right into that, like, that action comedy of the 90s, where it's like
right?
it just sit down and enjoy the ride. The lot of like the story and the story arcs, it got, hit the cutting room floor.
Hmm.
The tone of the film was a lot darker to align with the original comics, and the the stories and the emotional journeys for the turtles actually got cut because
Right.
of, time, budget, tone. They wanted to hit that kids market. The
Right.
reason this film even was made was because there was already a 1987 cartoon series that
Hmm.
blew up in popularity.
Okay.
In toy lines. I mean, it sold so many toys.
Right.
But with that popularity, no studio wanted to touch this film. They thought it was gonna flop. There was no way. So they went in as a true independent film, had no
Hmm.
studio backing, had no
Right.
distribution, made the film for 13.5 million and came away with 202 million at the box
Yeah, that's,
office.
that's that's pretty good return.
I
Pretty
mean,
good
it
return
was the
for
highest grossing independent film all the way up to the Blair Witch Project,
right.
which they made for like 60,000 and made like 248 million at the box
Right.
office.
It's just crazy, right?
Yeah, so that was, that was probably like what, in 2008 that movie came
Hmm.
out. So for almost 2 decades, it held that record,
Yeah.
you know. And I can see why. I enjoyed the film. I was like 8 years old when I first saw it.
Right.
I had already watched the cartoons. I was a fan of Turtles. I had toys. I enjoyed it. I was like impressed. Nowadays, like I said, story wise, is it the best? no, you don't get to see that hero's journey and stuff like that. But the way it was made, what they got done with what they had
Right. Well,
was just so impressive.
that's I'm really appreciative about that. What they did with what they work with the technology back then, with the puppeteers, Jim Henson's product. So that's those, and that's where I always, you have to watch a movie. You can watch it with a enjoyment hat or your filmmaker hat, and it's kind of that's where I am watching these movies. How did they do it? That looks pretty good, for what they had. Yeah,
Yeah,
and the aesthetics
and
of it.
you were talking earlier about like I think what Rotten Tomatoes was saying about it, how it had like a bunch of one-liners and stuff like
Right.
that. And it's like, well, there's a reason for that. These turtles with animatronic lips and eyes and facial expressions can't deliver a monologue.
Right.
Short, quick,
Right.
to the
Right.
point, and that's all they were able to give. But when they did that, it's like if you look at those lips and those facial expressions when they're delivering those one-liners, it's like, wow. It's like those lips are moving better than a
Right.
lot of the a lot of
Right.
the what we
Right.
see nowadays.
Right. They said it was they filmed it in 23, was it 23 frames per second, so it would look more natural.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they would speed it up in the editing suites and it would actually give it a more crisper, natural look. And they did that for the action sequence too, because they're in these heavy rubber, suits that man have to weigh at least probably 50 pounds when you put it all
Right.
together and with
Right.
animatronics in their heads. And if you look, maybe not in like the full combat when everybody's moving around, but when Raphael's on the rooftop and he's
Oh yeah.
doing the moves,
Right.
it's like, man, he's doing high kicks are like 6 feet high. He's
Right.
doing spin wheel kicks and getting up there and it's looking natural. It's like whoever was in that suit at that time, that
Right.
stuntman,
They're
needs to
doing a
have
good
a
job.
lot more credit for that because I can't even imagine doing
Right.
that. It's like I
Right.
can kick pretty high, but with 50 pounds and rubber restricting your joints and stuff like that, it's really impressive. Jim
Yeah.
Henson, like you said, this was his last film that he actually worked on.
Hmm.
He kind of had an aversion to the violent nature of it.
Right.
Jim Henson was way kid friendly. Everything he did was kid friendly. This was the only thing he actually had, any sorts of violence in it, you
Right.
know. Um, but he was a friend of the director, Steve Barron, who directed a lot of like Jim Henson's like storyteller
Hmm.
series or yeah, I think it was a series. And he did it as a favor for him.
Yeah.
And without Jim Henson, the film wouldn't have been that great.
Right.
What those animatronics were, the way that the turtles actually looked, and even Splinter looked was like insane. It took
Yeah.
like four
That was a
people to
good
do
costume there,
Splinter.
the rat. Yeah. One thing I know, when they're he's chained up on the wall and they're breaking him down, I'm thinking, wouldn't they react to the smell of this guy? Because he's probably stunk, is it like
Oh,
no turning?
yeah, and that is true. And when I saw that, I was like, okay, this is like kind of like old cliche of a New Yorker. It's
Right.
like you can't surprise a New Yorker. They've seen everything, right?
Right. Right.
Casey Jones comes in, he sees him, Splinter tied up, and he's all like, he has a quizzical look at a little, for a moment, and he's all like, he shrugs his
Right.
arms like, New York, right?
Right.
So it's like, yeah, I mean, everyone played it, like, to reality. It's like the actors took it serious, and it showed, and what was it? Elias Koteas was Casey Jones. Judith Hogg was April O'Neil, and
Hmm.
both of them did such a great job in
They
it.
did a job. Right. Right.
They wanted to have a name star in there. That would have just drove up the budget.
Right.
I mean, you wouldn't been able to get a main star and not have distribution already, right? Which having a star attached to your film is probably going to help you get distribution,
Right.
but
It's gonna hurt you in other
like I
places.
said,
Yeah.
that budget gets inflated so fast.
Right.
Um,
Right. Right.
and they had to like spend their money so wisely, and some of it actually made better sense to do it that way. Like we saw April at the very beginning. She does a news report. She comes out and then she gets attacked.
Hmm.
But the whole attack and the saving from the turtles was just done with a black screen. Lights go out like that. It's because they didn't have money. And they didn't
Right,
have time to do the choreography of
right,
that scene. So it's like, we'll
right.
just do it, in darkness. And what that did is it actually prolonged that anticipation for the reveal of the turtles.
That's true, right?
After that
It
scene, you see
still
the
worked.
the shadows on the walls,
Right,
and then as they're about to jump out and be revealed, the title screen shows up. When the title screen goes away, boom, then you see them.
right.
So it actually worked, and you have to give credit to the editors and the directors who able to use those limitations, like we talked about that before. Take those
Hmm.
limitations and use it creatively,
Right.
and they use it to build anticipation for the reveal of the turtles.
Yeah, that is a good point because it did, then it did help the reveal. I felt kind of like that scene where I see him tied up. I've kind of had I'm a product of Batman, the original Batman series, the kind of cheesiness of the ropes and stuff. Well, they just moved, but it was as as we talk about it, I did enjoy it once I knew what it was and how it was made and why it was made. Like I said, I knew nothing going into it other than it's four turtles, That's and I thought this was the first one. I didn't realize that this is part of a long series of product. Because just have the kids have the toys, and that's about all I knew. I never watched it. It
Well,
wasn't
yeah,
my
they
thing.
made a couple more. Like I said, the cheese got even cheesier. I mean, the
Right,
second one wasn't that bad.
right.
The first one was definitely the best album.
Hmm.
You know, does it say that like it couldn't have been better? Like I said, we talked about how the storylines got kind of dropped and it should have had a little bit darker tone. The second one, more with product placement. It was a cash grab at that point.
Hmm. Right,
They have Vanilla Ice doing a cameo in the movie and singing the song. Um, turning other creatures using the ooze to make different creatures, and
yeah.
when they grew from the ooze, all of a sudden they still had like baby child's minds. So they were all calling Shredder, mama. It's like, oh, spoiler alert, yeah, Shredder doesn't die. This is a kids movie. No one really dies, you know even though at the end, Shredder falls into a garbage truck,
Right,
and there goes Casey Jones with another one-liner, goes, oops, and
right,
pulls the lever down and crushes the helmet.
right.
Um, those one-liners, like I said, they need to do that. That's 90s were all about one-liners,
Hmm.
ever since like the 80s, that kind of carried over. Stallone, Schwarzenegger, they all had one-liners in the movie.
Adrian, yeah, right,
you know, I'll be back. It's
right,
like, or get to the chopper. Those one-liners are what people were like attaching themselves to back then.
right, right,
This wasn't 12 Angry Men or something like that where you have like this long monologue from people.
mhm,
Um, it knew where it was, it knew where its lane was, and that's why it was successful at the time.
right. Yeah, it did that. Yeah, with $202 million, that's as I say on 13 million. That's pretty successful. They knew what they were doing. Yeah,
Yeah, and eventually they got picked up. It was well into shooting, maybe even after they were shooting and working in the post, that it actually got picked up distribution from a little company called New Line Cinema.
right,
They did like Nightmare of Elm Street. They did the movie Critters, which you saw Raphael coming out of the movie theater,
right.
and he saw Critters.
It's
Like,
like
wow, where
critters,
did they
right,
come up with this stuff?
right, right, right.
It's like using everything that they can, that can tie into everything. They had a
Right.
lot of product placement in here. Pizza Hut actually did advertising for the movie. They
Right.
did like a $20 million marketing campaign for the
Hmm.
movie. Yet it was Domino's Pizza that was actually in the
Right.
movie.
Yeah, delivered the
You
pizza,
know,
right. And we were talking about the actors that they were in the suits. They had all had cameos, a taxi passenger, the pizza delivery guy. And I forgot where the other two were. Uh yeah, they all had
One was
cameos.
the foot soldier that was delivering a message to April and slapped her.
Okay, okay.
To shut her up. He's like
Right.
slapped her. Um, And then the last guy was one of the Lost Boys. You can kind of say him like the boy gang, at the
Okay.
end when Splinter was being taken away. And it was like, he was one of those,
Okay.
kids.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you got to use everyone you can.
Right, right, right. Well, I know that
You got
because
'em.
I always dress completely opposite whatever we're shooting because I know you're gonna throw me in there. I'm
It's like
we're
I am
shooting
gonna dress down, so you make
right.
sure no one gets in there. He's like, nah, we'll find someone. Like, you take off your shirt and give it to him and get down there.
I was shared hit that like with my coworkers. I said, see that guy dancing right there? That's me. That's me. That's you, David. How come you're not in prison? No, I said, no, no. Do my act
So
with Hitchcock.
one of the things that actually made it good, and made it successful, was the fact that there was respect for the original content.
Hmm.
The two writers of the comic book, you know, uh, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. Before the movie went into pre-production, the director, Steve Barron, went to them and they were going over the comic books with them. But he came up after going through all this stuff. He's like, the story's already right there.
Hmm.
And that's what we don't get nowadays. It's like we have all these IPs that are either based on books or previous, different kinds of medium.
Right,
And nowadays they're encouraged, like the writers and directors, not to be fans, have never read or seen the original material.
right,
And when you do that, it's like, well, you're just disrespecting, the original content.
right. Well, your
Even
fan base,
Kathleen
right?
Kennedy,
Your fan base.
Kathleen Kennedy, who's in charge of, Star Wars IP, for years, since George Lucas sold it to Disney, she said once, it's like, hey, Marvel's got, it's easy for Marvel, because Marvel has all these thousands and thousands of comic books to draw inspiration from. But with Star Wars, we don't have anything like that. It's like, well, when Disney bought Star Wars, there was hundreds and hundreds of books that were uh, made, under George Lucas's, demand. He had writers, they wrote it, he edited and okayed everything. And that what became canon of Star Wars. It's like
Hmm.
there was hundreds of books, but what'd she do? She just kind of like, well, it doesn't even exist. Those don't even exist. And what happens? Star Wars went down. Where did Marvel go? Marvel went up because Marvel was going, okay, here's this comic book. Here's this comic book storyline that went through a whole bunch of different, like, series of books. It's like, okay, we're going to use parts of that and put it in here. And
Right.
there's a clear difference on what is successful and what isn't, you
Right, well, they're
know.
staying true to the story in your you don't want to alienate your audience because that's who you're making it for. If people don't like it, word of mouth gets out, then you're done. You know.
Especially nowadays when you're actually remaking and readapting, IPs that have been made before, you're doing that because of those fans. It's
Hmm.
because we know those fans are going to spend the money on our product.
Right.
But if we go, we're going to ignore everything those fans liked and not do anything that is related to what they've already enjoyed, then you're not guaranteed to get those people's money.
Right. Yeah, because the way things spread on social media, boom, don't waste your time on this movie. I mean, it's that's kind of hit and miss because if someone said it's not good, I'm gonna probably go see it, because everyone has a different taste. But for the people that are gonna sit on the sidewalk for Star Wars, those people are loyal to the
Yeah.
original story. That's why I went to watch a movie. It's like, where all these characters come from? What is all this? It was one of the trilogy thing. What is all? Where's the people I know from my Star Wars? And it's just like, and that's why the kids never got into it. But they just never did.
Yeah, it's
I
just
think,
never a great idea to ignore that fan base. Look how popular Star Trek was, and how many
mhm,
times they brought Star Trek back.
right.
They brought back, in the '90s. They go, oh, here's Star Trek Next Generation. It's been like 30 years since the first series. You
Hmm.
know, so they kind of stayed true to Gene Roddenberry's characters and the way his
Vision.
storytelling was.
Right.
People were connected with it. Then what
Right.
happened? It's like, oh, let's start making movies again,
Right.
right? Let's make
Yeah.
more movies. And then another decade or so goes by. And it's like, let's reboot Star Trek. J.J. Abrams, he did a good job rebooting Star Trek. Maybe not so much Star Wars, but that's he had a lot of studios problems with there.
Right.
Star Trek when he rebooted, he had a lot more control, and he actually kept it in the same universe. He brought back Leonard Nimoy as
Right.
Spock. So it's just we did some time traveling, and we this is a new timeline, but the other timeline existed at one point.
Mhm.
He respected the what came before,
Right.
which
Right.
actually led to success. you
Hmm.
know
To me, it only makes sense. Stay in that. You have the audience; it's already built in. Just add to it. Yeah.
yeah. And that's what you gotta do. And they wanted to make this film actually in the mid 80s before the cartoon series came out.
Okay.
And if they did that, it would probably have been more darker, because they took a lot of the the humor and the kid side from the cartoon. It's like they knew they had to hit that kid audience because 1987 cartoon was made for kids
Hmm.
for sure. So if they took inspiration of that and didn't want to like ignore that IP, which actually it has numbers on the Nielsen ratings are high on it.
Hmm.
Like I said, all the toys were based on the cartoon.
Right.
If they want to take that popularity, they're going to have to keep that tone and keep that IP respect that was built from there,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Because the comic books weren't as popular as like say like a Marvel or anything like that, right? It was a independent comic book uh IP. It was from Mirage. So Mirage wasn't Marvel, it wasn't DC, it wasn't one like the big two. It wasn't even one of like Image or something might have been a little bit more popular than that. Mirage
Right.
was basically the low end, right?
Right.
So, like I said, the original content wasn't super popular. It got popular because of something that
Right.
got adapted from it.
Right. Yeah. The cartoon. Right. Right.
And the turtles, as a kid, they were super relatable. As a kid, they felt to me like, the turtles were kind of like a mood ring or those characters on the animated movie Inside Out, where they're all playing the different
Hmm.
parts of emotions or something like that. It's like one day you feel like Leo, another day you feel like Raphael.
Right.
Each of the turtles had like different parts of a kid's psyche.
Right.
You know, this one was the angry one. This one was the goofball. This one was the needed more confidence because he was the leader one. This one was the intelligent one, the brainy
Right.
one. On different days you can feel like a different one of these
Right.
characters.
And that reflected in their and cause I saw that I thought it had two red masks, but one was orange and one was red, and then was it green and blue, wasn't it? There's
It's
four.
Leo was blue, Donatello was purple, Raphael
Okay.
was red, Michelangelo was orange.
Yeah, orange.
Which
Yeah.
those colors actually came from the cartoon.
Right.
And in the original comic books, they didn't have bandanas. They were just they were all just the same looking turtle, but you'd have to tell them the difference between what weapons they were using.
Right.
And even their weapons were distinguishable with their personalities,
Hmm.
and their weaknesses. Leo had the swords, which were the ones that were actually like the only deadly weapon. The
Right.
sides are deadly, but a sword is something that's used for killing.
Yeah.
And this was for him to show that it's like, hey, there might be a time where you have to take a life to save a life.
Right.
And
And
he
what were
had to
those
come
other
to terms
things?
with that.
The other things, those other, they weren't even sharp. What the heck were they? They're like
Size,
what are they called?
a sigh, the three
Psi.
prong, yeah,
Yeah.
they are used actually for defense
Okay.
purposes.
Oh, just
you
to
know
fend off the
uh
swords and the.
in I believe in Japan early on, a copper, a police, they didn't have police, they were called like whatever they called, protecting and serving a village. That's what they would use to like, oh, there's a drunk guy, let me pull this out. you know a Bobby using a billy club. That
Yeah.
was
Billy
basically
Club.
their
Right.
billy club, right?
Right. Right. Right.
And Raphael was the more violent, the more angry one, the one that actually went off on his own. So
Hmm.
he was given those size because they were used for defense. They were used like, hey, you need patience. You're not going to go in there and win a fight with these. You're going to have to
Right.
be patient and be smarter about what you do
Right.
Donatello was the smart one who loved technology, and in the cartoon, who's always building contraptions and stuff like that.
Hmm.
He was given the most simplest weapon, a stick.
Right.
So it's like make do with what you had, right? All you
Right.
got is a stick. You're going to have to make do with that. Michelangelo, he was the goofball, the scatterbrain guy. So what he got was the weapon that actually took the most thought and most practice to actually like not hurt yourself, the
Right.
nunchucks.
Yeah, nunchuck. Yeah. I had
All
some
right,
of those when I was a
let's take a
kid.
little break and then we'll come back
Okay.
and we'll continue our talk.
Okie dokie.
All right, we are back,
We're
and we were
back.
talking about the turtles and the
The
way
weaponry.
they connected their weapons with their personalities. Which led to like one of my favorite scenes was like when all the foot soldiers came in, all of a sudden there was a nunchucker.
Right.
It's like, oh, a fellow chucker, eh?
Right.
They kind of had a nunchuck off, right? Kind of like a dance off, where it's like, okay,
Right.
this is a move, and it's like respond.
Those were big when I was in high school, nunchucks. People used to carry them in their back pockets or put them in their boots.
It's definitely a kids' film, and comedy is just for the kids. That scene was real funny to me. Just because of the foot soldier's reaction. It's like after like he does his move, Michelangelo goes, and the second time he goes, hmm. He's like he was impressed. It's like, okay, that
Right.
guy's got some talent. This turtle's got some
And it got the guy at the end, right? With the what was his name? The guy that the can opener guy,
shredder.
Shredder. Yeah, got him at the end with the nunchucks with the stick.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was just there's a bunch of details that we don't really get into because it was a kid's film, but when you start looking into it, it's like they really put effort into the writing,
Hmm.
to keep it true to that comic book because the comic book actually had that detail. There was a reason why they had those weapons. Each one of these turtles had their own personalities,
Hmm.
so yeah, I don't want to see them go through a hero's journey and changing who they are, but I do want them to actually go through more of a hero's journey through the traditional storytelling in the movie.
Right, right. We get a little bit more of a reveal of who they are, other than nuclear infected turtles, you know.
Right.
But oh, speaking of the nuclear infected turtles, when what's the rat's name?
Splinter,
Hunter?
Splinter,
Splinter,
like a
Splinter.
wood splinter.
Yeah. So when he's telling the story of the cheesiness of the dancing and stuff, like, this is so bad, but it's so funny, It you know, and then was Splinter a guy at one time, or is always a rat?
In the
Because
cartoon, he was actually a guy who turned into a rat.
yeah, because they show him embracing a girl. It
Right.
looks like a Japanese couple.
So
Like,
that guy, his master,
oh,
was
that's the guy.
actually him in the cartoon. In
Okay,
the movie was more like the comic books where he was literally a pet
okay.
of Master Yoshi, and he would just mimic,
Oh,
mimic
that,
the jujitsu in the cage. It's
you
like,
see
yeah,
it like I paid
that's
attention.
ridiculous. A rat, has that much intelligence, so it's like, okay, yeah, you gotta believe that.
But yeah, just it
I
was
believe more of the cartoon where it's like he transformed into the rat. It's like, okay, I can believe that more than
the other way around.
the other way.
I
But the
think,
way it
well,
was shot was great. Even nowadays, you look at it, it's like Jim Henson, and his team, just knew what they were doing.
right,
That rat and that puppet, that rat, when his master was there laying down and he was putting his little paws on his hands, he's like, man, I can
right,
see those little fingers actually moving and
moving,
actually
right, right.
tactiling on that surface. It's like,
That's
man,
probably
they
Kermit.
knew
That's
what they
probably
were
Kermit
doing.
helping along, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's insane of what they were able to do and the stories that were like told from the people that were under the mask were what's inside these turtles were crazy.
Hmm.
The whole head had so much electronics below them. The guy who played Raphael, Josh Perez or something, right?
Right. Oh yeah, right,
Josh Paez. He's done a lot. He wrote a book and he's talked a lot about it. He said it felt like a airport, conveyor belt, the baggage place, because
Right,
it was
right.
just
And it
everything
was
was going on, so close that, like the loudest noise you can think of was all going around your face.
right. Yeah.
And it was so close that even a stuntman, broke his nose, doing a stunt, because it's like there's very little room
Hmm.
there in between it.
Like you said in
So
the
it's
movie,
like you got to have a
he
lot of
knows it.
respect for those people that are actually in those suits, and
Right, right,
to do it nowadays, the director, and the guy who played Raphael, I mean, they said it's like there was no way it could actually be done, nowadays, because it would be
right,
so hot for the people under the suits.
right,
It's like, but that's what makes it, you got to bleed for your art, right? You
right,
got to work
right,
for your art. It shouldn't be easy, and,
right,
even mocap nowadays, it's not easy, but it's nowhere near as difficult as someone in a suit would be.
right, right. But then again, like I said, it leads to things that really help the film move along because things happen and the director said, "Yeah, just leave it in." Like we're talking about Rocky with the big banner. It was wrong, but they made it work.
Right.
And or the costume being too big, but it helps with the character, and he just go with it, and it helps move the story along. Gives the character something to work with.
Yeah, how
Because
that actor actually was able to move in the suit, well, that turned into the personality of how that character walks,
right, right, and it
right?
was
If you
not
had full
even
control
thought.
of it, then you just make them walk however you want to make them walk. And that's
Right,
just
right.
not fun.
Yeah, and it's my friend Jorge, he went to film school with us at HCC, but he said put a rock in your shoe and give you a little bit of character, when you like to take you out of your comfort zone, and that was kind of by situation, but these things that happen and they just kind of deal with it and it helps those characters evolve, makes them empathetic to the audience.
Yeah, it makes them feel unique, makes them feel natural. You don't. Not everyone's a stormtrooper. Not everyone needs to walk the same way.
Right,
Not everyone does.
right,
So to make it stand out, you do something like that, like a trick, like putting in something in your boot. It's like, okay, why is that guy limping? You
right,
don't have to tell him why, but it could be, it's like, oh, maybe he had an injury, maybe he played football or something, he had a busted knee.
right.
I mean, who knows what happens, right?
Right. By the way, I didn't get the part. It was for construction work. I didn't get the part. So it was, but
You had to
these
work on your
things,
cat calls for that, I
right,
guess. You didn't have a good enough cat call.
right. So, but yeah, these things they help move the character forward, and give the director something to work with.
Yeah, and I enjoyed how true the story stayed to all the characters, all the turtles' character, personalities, and
Right,
how they might look, they are 6 feet tall because the people in the stuntman are tall, but they were supposed to be teenagers, 4 feet tall and stuff like that, and that's why they are, kitty, teenager minds.
right,
Like they really nailed the psyche of these characters. One of my favorite scenes, happened in the very beginning, where Splinter, told the four of them that's like, hey, I'm not going to be here forever. When I die, you guys are going to be, just yourselves.
right,
And Donatello comes to Michelangelo after that talk, and Michelangelo is waiting for the pizza guy.
right,
It's like the pizza guy's got 30 seconds,
right, right,
And Donatello was like, so what Splinter was saying, what do you think about that? And he just pauses, goes, time's up.
right,
$3
right,
off. He dodges that emotional, dramatic
right,
conversation that, the intelligent guy wanted to have.
right.
Michelangelo, he didn't want to talk about that.
I'm not ready to have that conversation
Yeah.
yet.
And that's what you got from just that one liner. All it was, like I said, you can't have a full conversation with these animatronics without looking weird. It's like,
Right,
just dodges it, talks about something else, and you get that point where it's like, yeah, he is not ready to have this conversation.
right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the limitations of the set, because they shot in what, North Carolina,
Yes.
at Dino De Laurentiis studio, because it was I guess
They were having money problems. I think
they
it
had
was
money
going
problems.
under
So
foreclosure. So
yeah,
the state of North Carolina was stepped in and helped
incentivize.
it.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's good. And they were talking. I was just reading while we're on break about building the set for the sewer. They had to build an 8 foot box. It was really interesting. And those are the because I was when I was watching, I'm thinking the filmmaker mind came on. How the heck are they doing that? Because they're on a sound stage somewhere, and but dark. The black hides a lot. But I like the set. I really like the set design. It was really cool, and it really you felt like you're in a subway in a
An
sewer.
old sewer line, yeah.
Right. Yeah, it was really interesting. But the then the practical side is that, well, how come the girl's not wet when she comes out? Those kind of things. That's just
Well,
me.
the first time she was wearing a skirt, so it's like her
Right.
shoes might have been wet, and they were in maybe below, right below the knee,
Right.
in water. So it's like, yeah, it's like, she kept her hair clean, I guess.
Right. The continuity thing, the continuity. Yeah. So stuff like that. Not really as a filmmaker, just as a person watching it, makes me crazy. How come there's no ice in that drink? Or how come it's, the straw's on the wrong side? So, but it was it was a good. I mean, now that I know more about the movie, I enjoyed it for the campiness and the cheesiness of it. It was. I'm gonna have to maybe watch more.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta recommend it for someone who's actually got kids.
Right.
Pre-teenagers probably enjoy it more. Like I said, I
Right.
was 8 when I saw it. 3 years before that, I was 5 and the cartoon was out. So it's like,
Hmm.
under 10, if they got a kid under 10, it's like, yeah, show them nowadays and they'll probably be blown away.
Yeah.
Because like I
Yeah.
said,
No,
they're not
Sean.
looking at the limitations. They're just enjoying the ride, enjoying the
Right.
fun, enjoying the
The colors.
one-liners because they
Right.
can't pay attention for more than 30
Well.
seconds. If they're talking for 30 seconds, it's like, no, my brain's shutting off. Something needs to
Right.
happen.
And it's got to have something for the parent, like we talked about before. The movies have to have something for the parents because they're the one buying the ticket, and the parents need to be. I've gone to movies with the kids. Sometimes I've fallen asleep, but sometimes they're really funny because they do have that those comedic elements that the kids are going to go. They're not going to understand, but it's great
Yeah.
for the parents.
Oh, and there's a couple of those in here, and maybe they don't fly nowadays because they might not be as PC as we are nowadays.
PC. I think we're
This was
hopefully
the
we're done.
90s. But
Right.
the jokes weren't bigotry or anything like that. It was just for comedy's sake, and it was more lighthearted, in there. Um, and the thing is like as an adult, if you watch this nowadays, it's like, yeah, you might not super enjoy the movie, but you're gonna see how impressive it actually is
Hmm.
compared to, especially if you're watching this movie, you probably watched the other, Turtles movies that have been out, like from Michael Bay. If you've got kids and you're gonna watch this movie, you've probably seen those already. And when judging it compared to the Michael Bay ones, you're gonna be way more impressed, especially, being older and you've lived through the 80s and lived through the 90s. You'd be saying, it's like, man, we had no technology back then.
Right. Right.
How was that done? And,
Right.
and only through Jim Henson, you would get that. After Jim Henson, passed away and the popularity of puppetry kind of went away because you had Industrial Light and Magic. They
Right.
kind of took over, and CG
Right.
took over. But before that, it's like you had nothing. It would rack your brains, like how they do that. The closest thing that you probably seen that to the what they were doing in Turtles would probably be kind of like Predator,
Hmm.
because he was in a full suit and what he had little animatronics on his mouth,
Right.
in his eyes. It's like, these turtles, you look at their mouths, the middle goes up, these goes up, the eyelids and eyeballs change. It's like, man, they had like, 6 different parts of their face that actually moved animatronically. And it's like,
Right.
whoa.
Right. Yeah, I like it. I'm gonna have to. I'll watch one of the more recent ones and give it a. But I liked it. Just after watching it and talking about it and learning more about it, uh, I liked
You
it.
you missed the age to really like appreciate it through it itself,
Right.
right? With turning off your brain and just watching the movie.
Right.
Like I said, you need to have young kids, and we're probably like 10 years ago. If it was 10 years ago, it'd probably still pass as just pop it on and it's going to be a fun ride.
Right.
We're looking for more nowadays. We expect more nowadays. You know, the one-liners are more cliche nowadays. We don't really get one-liners. And
Mm-mm.
it's all about sarcasm nowadays, right? If
Yeah.
there is a one-liner, it's a sarcastic one-liner.
Yeah. That's true.
Um,
I'm going to check
and
our,
another one of the things is uh things I find funny is like I didn't really see it when I'm watching in normal speed, but since we have a digital medium and it's come on DVD and it's coming streaming, people can watch the movie half speed and they'll find these moments where you can actually see
well, you mentioned
the
that,
actor's eyes through the turtles' mouths,
right?
and it's like, man, it's like, yeah, I don't really see that when they do it. They, it edited out really well, and you don't notice that. But when you're watching at half speed, yeah, you can get creeped out.
Right. I'm gonna have to do that. It'd be interesting to see. Well,
or
interrupt me
or how the suits, and this was a shame how the suits have not lasted. They don't
prepared
preserve
well.
it.
Yeah.
We didn't
Yeah.
worry about preserving, props and, even films. There's the original Star Wars film is it has been lost basically. There is no 1975, or 74, original Star Wars, theatrical cut. It
Right.
doesn't
That's true.
exist anymore.
Yeah.
It took like what in the 2000s when Scorsese started the vault where he was like, going around buying prints of all the original films so he can
Right.
actually preserve that.
Hey, you know where they put those? Iron Mountain.
Really.
Yeah,
So
Iron
it can
Mountain.
last
Yeah.
a nuclear winter, huh?
Right. Yeah, because of the cool temperature. I mean, I have all that film that I have, all those boxing movies and stuff. I open up that cabinet sometimes and I can smell the vinegar. It smells, I have to get in there and air them out, and I need to do something with them.
Yeah,
Well,
but
the
if you
things,
you see what happened to these turtle suits, it's like, man,
right, with the neoprene and
they
stuff.
look
Yeah,
like
just
zombies nowadays. Some of them don't even have any of the rubber on there. It's just the animatronics and the
right,
eyeballs. It's like this is something that should have been saved.
right, right.
It would probably, could have been auctioned off and made more money nowadays, because
Oh
turtles
yeah, there's a
are
big
still
market for that
popular,
stuff. Big
you know.
market. Yeah,
Um, but it's part of film history. It was like the last project Jim Henson worked on, and how we not have those actual puppetries in those suits,
yeah. Interesting,
is
huh?
a shame because that's actually historically, something that needs to be cherished because
Right.
this was something that Jim Henson was,
Yeah, that was
proud
groundbreaking,
of
wasn't it?
because it was
Yeah,
like the most complicated thing he ever worked on, he said.
yeah. Hmm, interesting.
So overall theory, like we've talked a little bit about this, would you recommend it to people?
I give it three slices of pizza.
3 slices of pizza?
3 out of 4 slices of pizza.
Me, I still have that
Domino's.
nostalgia. I got to give it a four
Yeah.
out of five because I've seen all the other ones. They
Right.
kind of go down from there, and I've seen
Oh,
Michael Bay's versions, and Michael
I've
Bay's
seen the
versions
best
was
one.
not impressive. You know, I do wish I could see like the director's original, cut of it. He got fired at the end
Right.
of the film because they thought it was going to turn out to be too dark.
Too dark. Yeah.
And it's like, well,
Because he had Final
nowadays
Cut.
I'm older. It's like I kind of wish I might would see that to see if it actually, would bump that rating up a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you got a kid that's 10 or younger, this is a perfect movie. A lot of these kids movies nowadays, they can be kind of a drag,
Well, they're all
especially
social
once you start
commentary.
seeing it like 5 million times.
Yeah, they're social commentaries on how we should save the world, other than entertaining a damn kid to make up,
Or a bunch of music. It's like, okay, man, that song is getting really annoying. I don't need to hear
right,
a song being sung all the time, and it's just a
right,
chorus or something
right.
that they pick up. This is something that, like, yeah, a kid is gonna enjoy. It could get them into a franchise that is vast. Well, like I said, some movies are hits, some are miss. I told my friend about it. He's got younger kids. They enjoyed it.
Mhm.
They enjoyed it so much that they had to watch the second one, watch the third one.
Right.
Of course, my friend says, yeah, they kind of went down or kind of went up in cheesiness, for it. But, the kids enjoyed every single one of them.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to ask Audrey and Sean if we watched Mutant Ninja Turtles. Oh, my daughter Audrey just walked through. She's yes, they've had watched. It was thumbs up from Audrey.
Well, yeah,
I
I
don't remember.
mean,
I just remember
like I
having the
said,
toys.
nowadays we're in a different time. Back then in the 90s, it was spot on and it showed how it made as much money as it made.
Yeah, that's a stat 13,202 on 13.5. That's a nice chunk of change.
Oh, yeah, no, and a lot of those producers, a lot of those studios were probably like kicking themselves for not doing that.
Right.
And they probably took more risk on the things that they did produce later
Right.
on, and of course, they probably didn't turn out as good.
Right. Right.
This turned out so good is because, like I said, it was an independent film. They had $13.5 million riding on it, so
Yeah.
they had to
Yeah.
make it as good as possible.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. It was good.
All right, so we're gonna end it there. Make sure you take a look at this, especially if you got kids. It's a great family movie. Next week we have our Christmas episode.
Oh no. Are we going to do it?
Yeah, we're gonna talk about the best Christmas movie ever
All
made,
right. He was
Die
on.
Hard.
Oh, you don't say it. But I saw
I
something
gotta
on.
say it. No one will still believe it.
He was saying it's not a Christmas movie; it's a Bruce Willis movie. It's a
No,
Chris.
it's a Christmas movie.
It's a Chris. Well, that's a great movie. It's a good movie.
All
Well, I
right,
appreciate
David.
it.
So we're looking
Hey,
forward to
thanks.
next week. Make
Yeah,
sure you
and thanks.
check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcast,
iHeartRadio
iHeartRadio,
and Facebook. Huh?
YouTube.
We put it up on Facebook. Didn't you put it up on Facebook?
I think I put one episode on Facebook. We might put the
Yeah,
rest of them up on there, but definitely check us out on Spotify. Make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. That helps us out a lot.
right.
And we'll hit you up next week.
See you next week, huh? All right. Thank you, my friend.